This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, or so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Hi there. In today's episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, I had the privilege of speaking to two guests who've been on this show before. They work closely together on different projects despite living in different countries, the UK and Italy that is. They also share a fondness for the use of brainspotting to help their clients. Please welcome Ruth Chiles and Alessia Bruno today, where they discuss helping individuals achieve their hidden potential. They discuss secure early attachment and its impact on brain development, intergenerational transmission of traits and how it relates to performance issues. We've got emotional regulation, which is also widely talked about, and how you can incorporate awareness of your nervous system through focused exercises and routines. Ruth and Alessia also talk about challenges of pressure, perfectionism, an awful lot more with athletes and performers. And there's a focus on the importance of trust, creativity, and having a joy and playfulness towards what we choose to take part in. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, for the benefit of the listeners, Ruth, would you like to just explain a little bit about your background, and then Alessia can do the same after you've gone?
Sure. I'm a brain spotting consultant. I work mainly with in performance, particularly with musicians right across the world, most of the major symphony orchestras, as well as right across music genres. I have bluegrass, banjo players that I work with, as well as kind of more funk and pop and rock guitarists. So right across the board with musicians and with a number of athletes, particularly with runners and basketball players. And my main focus I'm also a musician. And so my main focus is about helping them see how they put the glass ceiling on their performance, and then how to lift those inhibitions so that they can really perform into their full potential. I'm particularly well known for my work with focal dystonia, but that's only one small aspect of the work that I do with performance.
Fascinating stuff. Over to you, Alessia.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for listening to this podcast. And thank you, David, for having Ruth and I here today with you. We're really excited. I initially trained as a clinical psychologist. I did my clinical psychology doctorate in Edinburgh, and that was mainly working on mental health. And when I finished the doctorate, I just developed a passion for topic of performance, athletic and creative performance. And I embraced brain spotting. I went to LA and Wisconsin and then Amsterdam to get trained by the founder, David Grant. And I became later on a consultant in brain spotting. And I was accredited by the European Federation of Applied Sport Psychology, the FEPSAC. And I'm very excited because this year, for the very first time, I'll be one of the speakers at the conference in Innsbruck of the European Federation of Applied Sport Psychology, and I will talk for the very first time about brain spotting and trauma and performance. So my passion is at the moment really about working with athletes and performing artists, young people as well as adults. And today I'll talk more about focusing more about the work you do with children. I do trainings accredited by the Ministry of Health, and I've been also like an international speaker in Japan and for the European Federation. So sportive cultures for me have always been there, always been present since I was a kid. I used to play volleyball competitively, and I really enjoyed it. And I see my clients have extraordinary abilities to really process everything that gets in the way of them being in flow and expanding, to reach the maximum of their potential. I work with a variety of clients, and some of the clients I work with that are in the testimonials achieved the World Championship title. So we are really excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, no, likewise. I'm really looking forward to the conversation and where this all heads. I suppose a few little themes that I picked out from what you both mentioned there were where people get in their own way, and I suppose helping people reach their full potential, essentially. So, Alessia, you're going to lead now, where we're going to talk about early attachment and how that can go on to affect performance. Would you like to?
Yeah, sure. And feel free to interrupt me anytime. So I strongly believe that we start to perform at an embryo stage, because what I say is that surviving is very difficult. If you think about the chances of an embryo to survive, that is our very first performance. And when we are in utero, we connect to the mom not only on the physical level, but we connect to the mom emotionally. And this is called attunement. And what we mean by attunement is that feeling felt is the sensation of profound empathy, connection, being cared for, safety, love. And this is the foundation of a healthy, secure attachment. But the bond between the mom and the baby can be interrupted. So we talk about rupture and this attachment and attunement in this bond. And this can be for a variety of reasons, such as maybe the mom got hospitalized, there are some losses, maybe the mother is depressed, the carer is depressed, or the child is put into adoption. There are so many reasons why this happens. But this interruption of the bond can happen even before we are born, even before we are in utero, because of what is called transgenerational legacy. So there is plenty of research on epigenetic and the impact that our ancestors have in determining the way we feel, we think, and we behave. And what is being showed is that we inherit the stress through what is called an uncoded DNA, which is the 98% of the total DNA. And this is responsible for emotional, behavioral, and personality traits. So epigenetic is really fascinating, because we inherit from the ancestor, from the mother line, from the father line. And also when we are in utero, we are like through cellular memory, things are transferred from the mother's womb to the baby. And this is fascinating. And from my experience working with adult clients and children, what I see is at times, if you collect their history, their performance history, the current history, the developmental history, still it doesn't make sense why they carry emotions such as shame, grief, fear. And then when you ask and you find out more about their ancestors, these are emotional, like this generational grief is something that has been carried on across and throughout generations. And there are studies on the Holocaust and research on the Native American that provides this evidence as well. So performance, why attachment and attunement is important, because attachment and attunement rupture have underlying causes in not only in current traumas, you can have injuries, you can go through a very stressful period in your life, you can have some losses, you can lose a contract, but also performance issues have underlying roots in developmental trauma and in childhood trauma, current trauma, but also is being found in transgenerational ancestral trauma. And when we talk about performance issue, there are so many, starting from blocks, anxiety, vocal dystonia that Ruth will talk more about, the yips, or twisted in gymnastic, excessive anger, rigidity, perfectionism, mental health problems, PTSD, repetitive sport trauma injuries, low self-esteem, block, overdoing. There are so many performance issues, which I can see from my work. They have this underlying traumatic roots.
Can I interrupt
Yeah.
for 1 second there, Alessia?
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. So, as a sports psychologist who I suppose isn't trained in brain spotting, my natural go-to would be to, in a needs analysis session, would be to look at the performance, the challenges they may be having. I'd look at their support network, try and understand their lifestyle. I'm guessing you'll do all of that, but then you go another level deeper where you're trying to understand more about their past history.
Yeah, obviously all the aspects you discuss are so important. You have to have an overview about the current situation, the current stressors, the resources, the support system, problem that the athletes or the artists might have with other people, with the teacher or the coach, with the parents, if it's a youngster. But when you further explore the origin, it's just compelling. It's really fascinating to discover that actually there are so many other issues that go in the way of the client's performance. So so you go deeper into that, which doesn't necessarily mean longer treatment, but it means more profound healing. And that is an important difference, that we do with brain spotting.
You obviously mentioned a lot of different challenges that people bring to us. Should we have a look at fear? And do you want to explain a little bit around the parenting side and how parents can help their children in relation to fear?
Yeah, certainly, like parenting style is affected by performance. Parenting style is affected by attachment, and then parenting style affects performance in children. And why is that? Because if you think about, when you talk about fear, you talk about being dysregulated. What is helpful to do as a parent when we talk about secure attachment is about a parent who's able to provide care and safety, love to the child. So the child will feel protected. This will impact on the self-esteem, will feel regulated. And so this child, in turn, will be able to cope with stress better. It will be able to comply with what the coach says, and actually will be able to trust and to follow what authoritative figure say to him, to her. But if you think about other form of attachment where, for instance, the insecure attachment, the avoidant attachment, this is a type of attachment where parents are not present, they're avoidant, they're absent, they're neglectful. And so the child, what does a child learn? A child learns to be emotionally disconnected, and so it won't engage. It won't engage with the team if it's an athlete, it won't engage with other people. It will be avoidant himself. And unfortunately, these are the children that are labeled as uncoachable, And then there are other forms of attachment, the ambivalence, where you don't really know where you stand as a child, time you're present, the parents is present, other time the parents is absent. This creates massive confusion, uncertainty, chaos, in the child. And so so the child will struggle to perform and will struggle to follow instructions. And then the worst type of attachment probably is the disorganized one, when the parents is the source of fear. The child is really frightened, is really overwhelmed, and this happens when there is abuse happening, like domestic violence or drug abuse in the family. And so the child becomes chaotic, dysregulated. And this has an impact also on the brain, especially in the part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is involved with different processes such as the self-awareness, the flexibility, autobiographical, explicit memory, planning, programming, and attachment actually, how, to shape these processes. And if a child is affected in these processes, obviously it's very difficult to be coached, it's very, very difficult. So attachment impact on parenting style, and consequently parenting style impact on the child and on his performance. Does it make sense, David?
Yeah, no, most definitely. I'm thinking here about the dysregulation aspect there as a child. So what advice would you offer parents? Because obviously, you're talking about the biological side to all of this, but I'm guessing parents can do something about this, about the way they behave to be able to help their children. And then once we've touched on this, then we'll bring Ruth into the conversation.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, you have to think, if you have to conceptualize, before you are asking me, so you don't only look at the present. No, I don't only look at the present. If you conceptualize in terms of transgenerational traumas, these are parents who probably, the dysregulated parents are parents who have not processed their past history. They need to heal, what is getting in the way of parenting, right? Because when you work with the children, you work with the system. It's very different compared to adults. You have your one-to-one session with adults. Yeah, at times the coach is involved. But with children, they're really highly dependent on their system, and the system has a massive impact. And at times I don't even need to see the child. I just address the issues with the parents, So it's very important when you talk about regulation. We talk about the autonomic nervous system, and Ruth will talk about that too. There are different divisions. There is a ventral vagus state, which is when you feel safe, when you feel connected. It's a state of affiliation. And that is when you can learn, you can be in the zone, when you feel secure through interoception, when you feel the body sensation, when you're connected to your body sensation, you feel secure. And when there is an interoception of safety, so when outside yourself, that place, a situation, the world is secure, that is when optimal performance can happen. But when you are dysregulated, you are either in a sympathetic mode, which is muscle tense up, you're ready for fight or flight, or you are in a dorsal vagal mode, which is freeze and collapse, which the hips are part of. And so in order to have the children, you as parents have to be able to self-regulate. And so you can have an impact on the part of the brain that is not fully developed, like the prefrontal cortex, which is so important in terms of performance.
Okay, so you say there about as a parent there, being able to help the child regulate, and that's going to help the
fear, the shame, the sadness, all the different emotions involved.
Yeah, and obviously that's then going to go on and help your child's brain development in the longer term.
Your child brain development, your child ability to relate to other, your child's well-being, your child ability to process stressful life events, and the ability of the child to be coachable. So by helping the parents when they struggle with regulation, you consequently help the children.
So the controversial this one. So the parent who, when their children maybe are in a heightened state, they're, well, as you say, dysregulated, and parent either shouts at them, tells them to shut up and move on, or they just throw an iPad at them. that isn't necessarily going to be helping them in the longer term?
No, probably these are the parents who were told as children to shut up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're not born like that with these patterns. You develop these patterns because this is what has been passed through generations. Probably your parents were told to shut up. So we have really to break this transgenerational legacy, to heal, is a better term, to heal this transgenerational legacy. And at the times, as I said, I work with the parents, I work with the adults, so that the parents, by healing their inner child, you know, the injury they had as a children, they don't replay the same history, they don't replay the same pattern, you know, they break the cycle. And so they free themselves, they free the past generation, and also they don't affect the future generations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's move on to Ruth. She's been sitting quietly there on the screen. So Ruth, yeah, do you want to talk about the nervous system and adults there, and how it is maybe vastly different, and again how we can help them?
So let me pick up there from what Alessia was talking about, these three parts of the nervous system. So we have our ventral vagal system, which is where we're in relationship with others. And we have our sympathetic nervous system, and we have our dorsal vagal part of the nervous system. So it's through the ventral vagal, that's where our attachment has happened or not, as our safe attachment has happened or not as children. So if there was a lack of attunement, so that connection is not there on a constant basis, then the nervous system of that child is then put into a kind of compulsive survival. Okay. And as an adult, then we're probably not even aware that our nervous system is in survival mode. It just feels really normal. It feels normal that I have to be in a hurry all the time. It feels normal that I've got to pressure myself to get results. It feels normal that I'm always thinking in the future and my objectives, and I'm not fully in the present. Okay, so those are just a few of the many signs of the nervous system being in survival. Because as a child, our survival is dependent on us being attuned to. Right? If we think of like the very early part of the brain in terms of our evolution as human beings, but also that's the part that's most developed in children. Children are defenseless, so the survival depends on them being on the radar of their parents at all times. So if a predator comes along, the first thing that happens is that they get protected. That when the food comes in, the first thing that happens is that they get fed. When it's cold, the first thing that happens is that they're kept warm. When it's too hot, the first thing that happens is that they are put in a cool place. So children's survival is completely, you know, at an instinctive level as children, our survival is dependent on us feeling we're on our parents' radar at all times. So when our parents are absent in some form or other, and this is all happening through the ventral vagal system, this part of connection as Alessia talked about, then if they're absent, or if they're aggressive to us, or sometimes they're present, sometimes they're not present, then we don't have this sense of being safely held, and therefore our nervous system is constantly in survival. Now, what happens in terms of the nervous system then as adults when we're performing is that we only have survival experiences of the sympathetic nervous system and the dorsal vagal part of the nervous system. Meaning that once I start to connect to my sympathetic nervous system, I'm in fight or flight. I'm in some kind of hyperactivity. And that creates the fascia. This is not the muscles, it's actually the fascia, which is the membrane that's around the muscles, but the fascia also moves right in between all the muscle fibers. And it has an element of smooth muscle within it, meaning that when the nervous system is in survival, the fascia tenses, and it's involuntary. So we're looking at part of the brain that's working at 11 million bits of information per second. It's subconscious, and it's involuntarily holding the body in tension. Okay, our conscious brain is only working at 60 bits of information per second. So 60 compared with 11 million, which is why self-talk, when I go, calm down, be centered, so on and so forth, doesn't work, because the survivor part of the brain has already done this to the body. It's disconnected the body from the part of the brain where the fine motor skills are engaged, where we have hyper levels of coordination. Okay, so that's where the work that Alessia is doing with parents and young performers is so important, because as they can release that at an early age, then their performance is going to be so much more enhanced right throughout their lives. But we can work with this at any age. So what happens is, as we start connecting to our sympathetic nervous system, the fascia tenses, we're in some kind of hyperactive mode. And as we connect into the dorsal vagal part of the nervous system, we either go into freeze or we go into collapse. Okay, so when you have that mental block when you're performing, that's freeze. When the mind goes blank,
yeah,
that's a freeze state. When you're in the state of feeling like, you know, midway through a game, for instance, a match, and you feel like it's useless, everything's lost, and it's like you feel, you know, you can notice how the energy drops in the body. That's part of the dorsal vagal collapse. What's actually interesting is that when we're in flow, we are engaged in all three parts of the nervous system at the same time. That in itself is an extraordinarily difficult skill. But we can learn how to do that. And in order to do that, we need to firstly heal the fear out of the system, because if there's fear in the system, as soon as I connect to my sympathetic, I'm in hyperactivity. As soon as I connect into my dorsal vagal, I go into hyperactivity. So however, if my nervous system is free of fear, or essentially free of fear, if I've healed my early attunement and attachment and bonding history, then I can be in my sympathetic nervous system. That's when we are absolutely excited with a game, with our performance. That's when we have that feeling of everything being more lucid. That's the sympathetic nervous system in play. I was having a conversation last week with this amazing flautist called Kirsten McCall. He plays in one of the Dutch symphony orchestras, amazing soloist as well. And he is also a composer, and he's begun to compose music for himself. And it's really difficult, the music he's composing. So we were kind of having this joke the other day about, you know, the different parts of him, the Kirsten composer and the Kirsten flautist, and what's the relationship between them. And he was saying they have a really great relationship, because as a flautist, most of the repertoire doesn't get me excited any longer. I need something that's so difficult that my nervous system comes up into this level of excitement, this level of peak experience. Now, that's somebody talking about their sympathetic nervous system being free of fear, so they can get into that absolutely expanded state. At the same time, he needs to be engaged with his ventral vagal system, because he's playing with a pianist, or he's playing with the other members of the orchestra, and that's union with other human beings at such a fast pace. And the same as we're working in a team, that's going on at such a fast pace, that has to be a subcortical attunement between us. So this isn't cortical, oh, I get on well with this person or badly with that person. There is this absolute level of attunement that's happening in the subcortical level, where we just move as one without even having to think about it. So he's on stage, on his sympathetic nervous system is flowing beautifully. He's in his ventral vagal nervous system at the same time, in connection with his pianist, but the dorsal vagal system also needs to be engaged, because the dorsal vagal is this profound connection to self and to creativity. You know, when that amazing shot just happens and you see it before it's coming in, and you just know, you know it's going in, you know where to move your body. There's an element of tremendous creativity in sport, as well as in the arts, that we access that through the dorsal vagal system. So that's this sort of profound almost introverted connection, interoceptive connection to self, and probably beyond, I believe, beyond self as well.
You know,
and so that needs to be engaged at the same time.
You know, in high performance settings, how I suppose the bar is so high, expectations are high, there's natural pressures there. There's so many elements out of people's control. How is it that we help them, I suppose, get those three parts of the nervous system in sync to be able to deal with those additional pressures and, as I say, elements that are out of their control?
So what I really, or it was a game changer for me, brain spotting, because what that enabled me with my clients to do is to heal what's driving the nervous system to go into survival. So what we can do, and then and it's not just about the performance, this is all about the preparation for the performance. So as a performer, what I want to be able to do is know how to engage with my dorsal vagal system, for instance, and be able to enter in and come out and flow in and flow out at will. And I understand it. I have such a deep level of self-knowledge that I can do that. I can know how to flow in and out of my ventral vagal system. I know how to flow in and out of my sympathetic nervous system individually, and then I can start to build them up together. And I'm going to be doing that in my practice. So I can do that in my brain spotting. Most of the people I work with have a daily brain spotting practice where they learn how to really engage with their nervous system in this fluid way. But then when they're practicing, as musicians, we spend hours every day practicing scales and technical exercises and all sorts of things that don't look like they're to do with performance. But we need to know where we're engaging our nervous system when we're doing that practice, as well as when we're preparing pieces. And it's the same for an athlete. When they're doing their skills training, it needs to be engaged. They need to know where they are in their nervous system as they're doing that skills training. So what happens when we get to the performance is those external pressures are of no importance, because I am here with me and I am completely engaged with my body and my nervous system. And I know just how to be the best of myself in the here and now. And anything that's where my control is. And everything that's out of my control, I'm able to actually phase out.
It's very easy for musicians, for athletes, for anybody really, when they're training, when they're practicing, to, I suppose, be there in body, but not there in spirit, where then they're not present. So clearly the techniques that you're talking about there are going to be able to help them do so. Alessia, do you want to just talk a little bit more about do you want to talk about the coaching side of things and coaching styles and how coaches can help the athletes in that respect? And then maybe Ruth can take over.
Yeah, so first of all, we have to consider that at times coaches are the source of trauma, right? Because the coaching style might be very rigid or abusive, or might have really high expectations. So what would be like a great coaching style? What is, what is a leader? A leader is somebody who allow people to generate solutions, to develop talent and skills, who is there to support, right? It doesn't substitute the parents, because at times there is this mistake, where coaches feel in charge of actually caring too much for the child as if they were parents. So there needs to be boundaries in that. But what a good trusted figure like a coach will need to be like is really about creating, if it works with the team, creating harmony within the team members. And also you have to think what age the coaches, people, because will be very different, how you relate to the age group. It can be if as somebody who's 6 or 7, is a different what you expect compared to somebody who would be like 11 or 15 or 20 or 30. So when you coach, you have to think about like communication, age appropriate, expectations. You have to think about liaising with parents because the children are highly dependent on the system, right? You have to make sure you are regulated yourself to be able to manage this regulation and create good teamwork. So these are all important aspects to consider. And also because children, they go through muscle development, they're still in the process of brain development, and also they have a growth spurt. These are all aspects that needs to be taken into account because also risk of injuries, when you're overtrained. And what I've noticed is that when athletes reach a certain age, like 10, 11, that you raise the stake, you have more expectations, the challenge is higher, and these children have to juggle, they are not professional athletes or artists, but they have to juggle academics demands, athletic or creative demands. You have to take that into account as well, because you don't want to risk the child to burn out, right? And also you have to consider that the child doesn't have the same level of emotional maturity. And when you win like a world championship competition, this can be like a good thing. On one side, you feel like great, but on the other side, you are going to deal with expectations, judgment. And if you don't have that emotional maturity because you're a child, you really need the coach to be your ally, to be on board, to support you as well as your parents. So there are all these different factors that needs to be taken into account.
It's a tough job being a coach, isn't it?
It's a tough job,
yeah.
but it's also a very rewarding job.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I think what you've highlighted is that it's so important for coaches to treat the people that they support as people and not necessarily just as performers or athletes. And that
yes. And another thing that is very important, especially when you work with young people, not only with adults, but especially with young people, is fun. Is fun, because fun is the fuel of motivation. With young people, you have to look at the process, not only about outcomes, not only about results, because you put so much pressure into them. And what you teach in sport or in the creative field as well is something that can be applied in life. For instance, when we talk about the process, is about, okay, what have I learned from today? What I did good? What I can improve? Is there anything positive that I take home from this experience? What was great, about this competition? So these are all processes that you can take home without actually focusing so much on results, because the results is not something that you can control 100%. And so you put a lot of pressure when somebody is really young,
And also, I suppose that the fun aspect, when you are having fun, you're probably using those three different aspects of the nervous system, essentially. Go for it, Ruth. You can.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know if you were asking me or to Ruth.
Yeah, it's all right. Ruth can talk a little bit more about that, and then.
Yeah.
So, would you agree, if you're having fun, that is a big help in that respect?
Well, I think it's an indication that we're not in unhealthy adaptations. So we have 5 gifts that help us be really great performers. Okay? Everyone has these gifts. Some of us have them more profoundly than others, or we're more connected to them than others. And those are probably those of us who are driven to perform. However, because of the nervous system being in survival, they become adapted, right? So, and actually I have a book coming out in August. It'll be on pre-sales in a month's time now anyway, where I talk about all this in a lot of detail and how to use brain spotting to be able to heal the survival in the system and come back to the gift rather than the adaptation. Okay, the book's called Free to Perform. So let me just talk about the 5 gifts very briefly and the adaptations that happen with it, because I think that's going to answer the question about fun. So the first, and I put them in this order just because I think it's a logical order with when we start unwinding things, but doesn't necessarily need to be in this order. But the first one I talk is about the attuned empath. So as a performer, we need to have the capacity to attune to other people, right? Actually, as a coach, we need that capacity, which you've already been talking about. However, if the nervous system is in survival, then we get caught into people pleasing. So I lose my ability to be attuned to myself whilst I attune to others. And I come out of myself and I'm focused on the outer world. So I'm focused on, did I please my coach? Did I get the results that were expected of me? How do other people see my performance? Rather than being really attuned to myself and being able to self-assess about, was I connected internally into the place where my best performance comes out of? And if not, what can I do about that? Now I'm in my sphere of control. Okay. The second one, and this is where we talk about fun, is discipline and constancy. There's an amazing book written, published by the Cambridge University Press, where I think it has 200 studies about what creates peak performance. It definitely says it's not about talent, raw talent or genius. In sports, there are certain physical aspects that are necessary, but taking that out, it has nothing to do with that. The main factor is the hours of practice that we have put in.
And I'm guessing sorry, I was going to say, I'm guessing how we use those hours of practice as well.
Exactly. The other 2 factors are the teachers that we've had, including our coaches, and parental support, interestingly. But anyways, let's talk about the hours that we put in. It's about quality practice. So we need to be disciplined. We need to be constant. But if we get into adaptations, what that discipline becomes is rigid. So it becomes a straitjacket. It becomes like this, having to use the thinking brain to force ourselves into having discipline. But actually, when we're really deeply connected into the safety in the nervous system, we do what we do because we love it. You know, I play hours of music every day because I love it. I go out for a run every day, pretty much, or certainly 6 days a week, because I love it. And if I start to become rigid, I start to become adapted, then I stop loving what I'm doing. And then I get into this battle in terms of having discipline to practice my skills. So if we are having fun, we know that that part of our nervous system is free and it's not in survival mode. So it's as much of an indication as it is a necessity. Children,
athletes, that they're often told they should be doing A, B, and C to improve and get better. There's pressures obviously placed on them at a young age. I'm guessing sometimes actually there's too much pressure added, and they should be allowed just to relax and well, yeah, have fun.
Because I think the teaching is about results orientated. That's the problem. If we can teach children how to be engaged with themselves, right? So when their body is working the way we want it to, like their skills are absolutely, have a very precise skill, it's about actually having the interoceptive sensitivity to know what the body felt like as that happened. And children are brilliant at brain spotting. Some of the young musicians that I work with, I will teach them how to then brain spot. That's an expansion brain spot, that feeling that gave them that result. So they take their mind out of getting the results and into staying in connection with the body, which will get the results as a matter of course. So they can let go of that external pressure and just stay really connected, of knowing their interoceptive sensitivity, increasing that so much that they know what is, they just know what to do, and they stay really connected into themselves. And part of, and one of the other gifts is what I call a sensitive aesthetic, which is this ability to have that level of connection to qualities, internal qualities. And that gets adapted into perfectionism. And the perfectionist, because of these external pressures around performance, rather than making it fun, that the child, and also as adults, I mean, I make my practice fun every day. Even I might, just be done half an hour of scales. I make it fun because what I'm doing is I'm feeling internally, oh, wow, that was a lovely sound. And I'm connected with what happened internally when that sound came out just the way I wanted it, or when the fingers moved just the way they wanted it, or the feeling of the vibration through the flute. So that's how we keep it fun. Even though sometimes we are doing things that are serious, we don't need to get mentally serious with them.
Yeah, and that often does happen, doesn't it, as an adult, where, yeah, but as you say, the pressure of results and outcomes takes over, and yeah, I suppose depending on whether it's the sport or the musical instrument they're playing, it can be like quite controlled, can't it, the way they try to play, rather than being quite instinctive.
And a lot of this comes down to self-trust. So again, one of the other gifts is the vision, what I call the vision, which is the ability to really feel my potential. I have an internal sense of what my potential is in my field, and I can trust that. And we learn not to trust that. We get taught not to trust it, because we get taught, you made a mistake with this, you need to do that, you need to do this better, rather than knowing, if this is flowing through me, if I just put in the right amount of practice in the right way, it will come out the way I want it to come out. And I can develop this deep sense of trust in myself. And therefore I'm able to, any performance has this high level of uncertainty to it, right? So if I have this deep sense of trust in myself, therefore I can connect deeply into myself. And that uncertainty doesn't seem scary any longer.
And the perfectionist will really struggle with some of those aspects.
And they're perfectionists because their nervous system is in fear. I think that's the key point. So if we can come back to using a tool like brain spotting to help the nervous system let go of the fear, and therefore we are working with our life history, and we can actually stack our life history all on top of each other. We don't have to work on it chronologically. We can work on it in the moment. As we heal that, and we come back to this sense of trust in ourselves, the ability to be attuned to ourselves, and the ability to be in safety, then we don't need to be perfectionistic. Because perfectionism comes from this fear that something awful will happen if I get it wrong. Fear of failure to a degree. Yeah.
Alessia, do you have anything to add at all there?
I'm on the same page with Ruth. It's very important to make sure there is creativity involved as well in athlete's life. And actually, I'm reflecting on a case, when of a person who got a really bad injury and so was stuck, for a long period of time. And actually having a creative brain allows you to think adaptively, outside the box, to think flexibly, and being open, to new opportunities. Also, I was reflecting on the importance of brain spotting, as Ruth was mentioning, that the subcortex is where the fast processing occurs, right? So 11 million bits of information processing, that is really, really fast. And subcortex is also where trauma is locked and stored with its original charge, intensity, and with the age of when the trauma happened. So that's why adults as well, at times, they feel like they feel like that child who got hurt, injured, you know, neglected, abused, or criticized, although they might be great, you know, in terms of how they conduct their adult life, but that feeling, that fear, that shame, or that dissatisfaction, inadequacy might have a very profound injury and has the age of when the trauma happened. So the tendency of being perfectionistic, obviously, as Ruth was saying, you know, is the need to control, right? Because you have to compensate that inadequacy. And through brain spotting, you know, you access that part of the brain, you know, the fast processing part of the brain, which is the subcortex, which is also where the trauma is held. So that's why it's great for performance.
Makes a lot of sense. Do you have anything to add to this, Ruth, before we wrap things up?
I think the only thing that I would add, apart from saying thank you to you, David, for giving us this opportunity to talk about, you can see Alessia and I are very passionate about our world within this. I think the only other thing I would say is just about going back to we do what we do in terms of if we're athletes or musicians or dancers, we do it because we love it. It's in our soul. And you know, and I think it's such a shame when, as a professional, we get to a point where everything feels tight and held, and it becomes suffering. And just to remind, you know, anyone who's listening to this who is a performer, it can come back to be that absolute sublime joy that it was when you were a small child, when you began with whatever your passion is. And that's where we want to be, because life is really short. And particularly life as an athlete is really short. Let's enjoy it and have fun and be inspired.
That's actually a lovely way to end the podcast episode on a nice uplifting note. That, yeah, be it the athlete, the performer, the parent, the coach, everybody can have a positive impact on the way this all works. So I believe the two of you are doing a program in the very near future. And Ruth, you've also, well, if you've highlighted, you've got a book coming out. Yeah, Alessia, do you want to just share with the listeners some of the information there? And
yes, we are excited to deliver the Flow Master program. Ruth and I developed this Flow Master program, which is a very complementary program for therapists who did phase 1 and brain spotting, you know, at least phase 1 brain spotting. And it's for brain spotting therapists. And we will be talking very much in depth about the different things that we have touched today. It will be a very practical, experiential, you know, program with plenty of demonstration. And in my case, I will also show videos of minors that I treat using brain spotting, and like young athletes and performing artists as well. So we have developed this program, and Ruth, you can, you know, add things into it as well, feel free, because so far the approach to performance, like the mainstream, maybe psychology approach to performance, has always been from a neocortical perspective, you know, only about mental toughness, goal setting, and this program will help performance to actually to expand, and will help, you know, performers to overcome the blocks that gets in the way of performance by looking from a different frame, which is a more profound frame, which can also be, you know, as you mentioned before, a spiritual healing as well. You know, not only a cognitive and emotional and somatic healing, is really moving to a different level, you know, of a personal expansion.
And yeah,
would you like to add something into it?
Yeah, over to you, Ruth. Yeah, and whereabouts can people find this information out as well?
So we have a website. David, are you able to put the website then with the podcast? It's the flowmasterprogram.com. And so, as Alessia said, this is open to anybody who has completed phase 1 of the brain spotting training. And again, you can find that online if there are any so if you're really interested in this, but you're not a brain spotting therapist, but you are working as a coach, or in performance work, then you can find online a nearby phase 1 training or an online phase 1 training, and you can complete that. We start in October, so with that training, then you can come in and join us on this program, which will run across 7 months. So as Alessia said, it's very practical. You get theory, you get demonstrations, and you get the chance to practice in each of the modules. Then several weeks after the module, we have a group supervision session so that you can talk about anything that you have come across working with your clients that you didn't know what to do about, or brought up more questions. And then the month later, you have the next module. So we really wanted to create a very in-depth and practical learning program for people who are like us, are passionate about helping people to be at their best in their performance.
Yeah, no, it sounds such a helpful program for practitioners, and then the benefits for the performers further down the line as well. So yeah, all of those details I'll make sure in the show notes. Contact details for both of you again will be in the show notes should people want to reach out to you. And yeah, both of you, a big thank you for your time and your sharing your wisdom today. It's been absolutely fascinating.
Thank you, David, for the opportunities, and thank you, Ruth, for being here today as well.
Thanks, Alessia. Thank you, David. Yes.
It's amazing how many times I have conversations with different athletes and different coaches. And when an athlete goes through a difficult time, they have some challenges, some setbacks, things aren't working very well for them, they generally go back to technique, to tactics. They might look at physical as well, and they might change up their routines, the sort of stuff that they do in the gym. But often the mental side gets left. It might get left for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then they delve in. And I think certainly listening and hearing Ruth and Alessia today, it certainly opened my eyes again, and I'm sure it's going to open your eyes to the complexity of the mental side of sport. It's not all about just thinking about how we feel, what we think about, and how we act in specific situations. It can go back to when we were younger, our parents, relationships, all this sort of stuff. And I really do hope that, Alessia and Ruth's insights have given you some extra knowledge, some tips and some education. I would certainly check out their work. It is very, very insightful and fascinating. Until next time, I hope you have a great day. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.